Is it possible to mistake schizophrenia for telepathy? I hear you ask. Well, not on this show. Welcome to the open source. Tom and I are joined by Patrick and Tom. Tom and Tom. Welcome to the open source, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
And we'll get into introductions in just one moment. We're going to first off cover a couple of reviews that we've had, I think, James. Is that right?
Yeah, we genuinely have had some reviews. This review is for episode 3, An Assault on All That Is Good in This World. Maybe that's not kind of a good one. This is a real I'll listen to it later podcast. Brilliant. Someone's put here, a religious experience. It's fine, absolutely fine. and my favourite one, Tom and James are genuine, fun, and great hosts, and the podcast is free. It's not the best review. Like watching a log fire in the hope a log doesn't fall out and burn the house down. Well, there you have it.
Oddly specific.
Yeah, high praise indeed. But anyway, keep the reviews coming. We can only go up from here.
Thanks for those reviews, guys. I'm looking forward to hearing more of those in the future. And so the theme of this week's episode is working remotely. But just to get things started, let's take a look at this week's headlines. Switching it up, how companies manage remote working during the pandemic. Now, a few of us on this call, in fact, all of us at one point or another have worked for Acquia. And I think Acquia actually managed that transition really well. But it's always interesting to hear about how other companies made the switch. And then, of course, how those individuals working for those companies have adapted. We've got some quotes here from Services Australia. The number of staff working from home at the height of COVID required a rapid mobilization of resources to support a remote work environment and minimize disruption. I mean, it's not a very exciting quote, but unfortunately, that was the real crux of what had to happen during the pandemic. So, Tom, Patrick, probably the perfect time to introduce yourselves and also give away your location in today's remote working themed episode. Tom, please, you first.
Yeah, so first, thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. And my name is Tom Richardson. I'm the managing director for a company called Invision here in Asia Pacific. I moved from Boston to Sydney about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now.
Fantastic. And so it's just after 8 o'clock in the morning for me. What time is it and what day is it for you, Tom?
So it's the best time of the week is about 7:15 on a Friday evening. I've got 3 kids and they're all going to bed right now. So if one of them appears naked at the door behind me, then, apologies, the reviews are not going to get any better.
Nice. I love it. And mine have just gone to school. Patrick, where in the world are you today?
An attic. Technically, I am one of those guys. I am outside of Honolulu on Oahu, the island of Hawaii.
Wow.
Which is fantastic. And so what day is it and what time is it for you?
Technically, it is Thursday evening, 10 something in the evening. So I'm all business up top, but jammies down below. Yep. Psyched to be here, though. Thanks for having me.
James, I don't know if there's anybody else who's claimed this before, but this is the first podcast that's happening on 2 days simultaneously, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's any way we could sort of use that to win the lottery.
I'm not sure it works like that, James.
No. Oh, okay. All right.
Good try, though.
If you do, I want to cut, though.
Deal. So, guys, the whole theme for today is working remotely. Firstly, both of you work in time zone remote locations for global companies anyway. So maybe we can start there and then meander through to what it's like in COVID times. Tom, how's that switch been for you going from Boston to Sydney?
Yeah, I guess there's 2 parts to it, right? Because when I moved from Boston to Sydney, it was not COVID times. It was very much the pre-COVID world. And so 7-8 months after I joined, COVID really hit. And it's interesting because before COVID, Invision was kind of this poster child for remote work. So when Invision was founded 9 years ago, it really was a revolutionary kind of step change in the way that companies design digitally. The whole idea of designing in the cloud collaboratively And having this kind of log of all the feedback over time on all of your prototypes and all of your work just really made life easier for designers, and kind of came at just the right time when digital production and design was really starting to take off. So the headquarters of Invision is a PO box in New York City. There's no offices anywhere in the world. And I used to get people hitting me up on LinkedIn all the time, asking me to come and talk to their company about remote work and how I lead teams in a remote environment. But yeah, it's been a kind of relatively painless transition for us, just because we were set up for remote from day one. But it doesn't matter if you've been fully remote forever. There are certain limitations when you can't be together and can't travel if you choose to, that make things more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And so, switching gears a little bit and going back in time to yesterday, Patrick.
Well, I guess I got a head start on working remote. Similar to Tom, I was working in a separate location. I was starting out as a freelancer consulting this magical world, which was really exciting. But it was me, myself, and I working out of a barn in Texas, coming up with whatever type of internet solution I could make happen, which included working out of my truck out of a Starbucks parking lot, no lie, for the start of Corona. So it was really interesting making that shift, a different shift in perspective of how you're working with people and understanding, number one, that everyone's just trying their best, and there may be a kid running behind, or there may be a dog playing tug of war under the desk. But it was actually quite fun. You start to, see into people's lives in different ways. And for one example, this woman, Carrie, that I worked with, anytime her child came in the room, she'd go, "Come over here," make the child stand in front of the camera and go, "Say hi to all the people you're interrupting right now." And you would see this kid just get like beet red. But it was just a magical moment in the day. Like, I'm really grateful for the shift. But at the same time, grateful for companies to exist and to be able to support employees in this new world where, we're trying to create balance among this always on culture. I've been very fortunate enough to be consulting with Acquia as of late, and they're supportive of a very global spread and a global audience of, you're going to check in when you can, you're going to communicate as often as you can, but it also makes space for accommodations, when life happens, which it does. And I think we're all just starting to flex that empathy muscle a little bit more for each other, knowing that we've got a lot going on in our worlds. And it may sound a little selfish, but at the same time, life is short. And I think we do have to prioritize our needs, our wants, whether that's a hierarchy of them or just the things that make us driven and keep us moving forward.
You find it easier to disconnect in comparison with you, Tom? Do you find that you feel more obliged to connect? For example, I feel a little bit of pressure to stay more connected because I'm remote.
Firstly, I'm very lucky because hugely supportive boss and kind of hierarchy here at Invision who really understand remote and really understand the pressures that it can put on people, isolation, loneliness, and how to counteract that and support people working in that way, which is very, very fortunate, very privileged. What I found is that when I've been expected to be in a physical location at specific times, I found that really constricting, even though if I'm left to my own devices, I'll end up working longer hours and kind of, more flexibly, but like working harder probably overall. Mm-hmm. And I'm just fitting it around the things I have with 3 children and, everything going on in life. I think the combination of that freedom in the way the company's set up, plus a supportive structure, plus my own innate drive to want to succeed, kind of, those things come together, and it's nice because I'm doing it for my reasons rather than because I'm being told you have to be here at a certain time and do something.
Yeah.
I'll share a lot of that sentiment. I'm a baby of the family that grew up in a family of restaurateurs. So my babysitter was the dish pit at the restaurant. So I kind of grew up working, and I love working. It's both passion, play, and obligation. So I find that I do have to be very deliberate about disconnecting. It's interesting. I read an article not too long ago that they're now prescribing 2 hours of outdoor time or 2 hours of time with nature, which is the new kind of, 3 8-ounce glasses of water a day. And, that's kind of part of my practice every day. It's a part of a practice. I have to leave my phone behind, or else it is very quick and easy. We all know we've heard of doom scrolling. We all watched that social documentary on Netflix, and realize just how kind of addicting it is, not only from a social context, but also from a work context. It's really easy to pull up email really quick and be like, I can fire off 1 or 2 more. But is that serving you? Is that serving your end client or your colleague on the other side who maybe it is late? I really respect what some of these nations, Australia, France, et cetera, have done in terms of like putting down hard barriers to make sure that people are protected from the workaholics. And we have to be protected from ourselves sometimes too. I got a question around team culture for you and Tom, or for the two Toms. Does it require extra effort right now? Do you have to get extra creative in terms of how you're forging bonds or forging relationships or demonstrating interest in the people's lives that you're working with?
Yes, is the short answer. So when we first went into lockdown, I was doing a daily stand-up with my team. At that time, running a marketing department, everything was changing every minute. And so that worked really well. And then we dropped into a 3 times a week with one formal team meeting. And that's on a Wednesday for my team. And then 2 checkpoints, first thing Monday, first thing Friday. They're much more informal. Sometimes we do them as walking meetings, actually, so that we can get out the house and get people,
cool,
in touch with nature as well. But most importantly for me is in my team one-on-ones, I purposefully take the first 5 minutes to not talk about work with them. My style previously would have been bring my team together once a quarter, take them out for dinner, buy lots of wine, and have a great time. And you get that rapid acceleration of a comfort zone for everybody. But now you have to build that up over a longer period of time. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I'm really, really careful about and interested in is this idea that, you can try and do something that's like fun for the team, but it's like you may be taking time away from them doing something they really want to do, right? And so there's all that, as a manager, you feel like I want to create a great team culture where everyone wants to hang out together and everyone wants to, do things socially as well. And of course, I think that is a really important part of a team, getting to know the whole person. But I'm also conscious of the fact that, especially working from home, like there are some days where it's like people need every minute they can get, and they don't want to be on another Zoom because they're tired. They just want to like see some real people and do all that stuff. So the hardest part for me is balancing, forcing kind of collaboration and culture versus letting people do what they need to do with their time rather than making it another work thing they've got to handle.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. James and I, sometimes at the end of our podcast, we do things like come up with a crazy business idea, or, we play a little game or something like that. And so today's kind of little game that I thought I'd suggest is 2022, new world. Hopefully we'll all have been vaccinated and out there, and let's not get into the vaccine versus anti-vaxxers conversation right now. But what does the future of work bring for us? I'll go first just to give you guys some thinking time. My prediction is going to be the really obvious one, and that's that different companies will have different comfort levels with working from home flexibility. We will all start to find companies that have a flexibility model that works for us, and that will become more and more of a criteria. So I don't think it's going to be hard and fast. Every company is going to send everybody to work remotely. But at the same time, I think there'll just be a range of flexibility options available, and different company cultures will share their flexibility options as part of the, interview process. So that's my prediction. Who wants to go first?
I like that menu of options. I'll go next. I think this is more of a hope than a prediction, but I think back about like 20 years ago, fax machines were still prevalent. Computers were getting adopted, and work was just starting to pick up. Output was starting to pick up. And here we are now with just mega output all the time. And I think it was Microsoft last year that experimented with a 4-day work week in Japan. They managed to do a successful pilot, and I don't think they've returned. I think they've managed, at least with that pilot group, to stay in that capacity. My hope is that maybe companies realize that the energy and the output that their workers and their employees and their teams are giving are enough to, maybe reduce the number of hours they're expecting people, or to your point, giving them options of flexibility. There are those styles that maybe we can recognize different levels of efficiencies and outputs from people, so that there is just more flexibility at the individual level.
And so it's really interesting because I spend a lot of time thinking about, is everything going to be the same as it was before, or is everything now forever different? And I think that there's a bit of both here, which is a fudge. But basically, I do think that there's going to be a strong rebound and kind of like elastic effect where people are going to want to spring back into the things that they couldn't do before, whether it's business travel, personal travel. Part of this kind of shift had been happening before COVID of a generation of business leaders starting to kind of die out or retire, who were very much in the command and control kind of philosophy, who grew up in that era where people typically stayed at companies for longer. There was an ability to lead in a certain kind of context through, do as I say, and punch the clock and everything else. And I think that it's been really interesting in Australia. There's a lot of conversation amongst my peers who work at very large companies that were fully on premise before about how some of the really senior people who were very well respected and have really struggled in the last year because they are not the new generation of open leadership, which doesn't need to see people in front of them doing what they need them to do to know that it's happening, doesn't have that flexibility around where and when the work gets done, isn't managing to outcomes, but it's managing on inputs. And so there's a lot of reckoning, I think, to come for managers at all levels, and I think it's going to make managers better. And I'm sort of optimistic that leadership will improve as a result of this new kind of forced, I guess, transition and way of working. I don't think it's a generational gap. I think it's more kind of, there are certain people who are much more comfortable, whatever generation they're from, with trusting a team and setting a tone, setting a vision, and letting the team go out and execute on that. And there are some people at all ages who are much more comfortable with, I need to see what someone's doing, I need them to be there, I need to kind of like monitor. And I think that kind of persona is going to struggle big time in the next phase of business.
James, last but not least.
So I'm sort of on the same lines of Tom, then there is this part of me that's also hoping that we move towards a model where we're measuring not just the bottom line stuff that leaders measure. So, there's this pie chart flying around globally of this is what success looks like, and that always includes a little segment of health and well-being, and it includes a segment of exercise. But we only measure the leaders are only really measuring the bottom line, and that's the reality of it. And I think that culture needs to change. Whether it will or not is different, but I think that culture needs to change for one simple reason, and that is that next year there'll be a lot of high-performing individuals who will start to ask themselves, am I in the right place? And if it's not clear that they are, and what their objectives are clear, and how they're being measured, and all of those aspects from well-being to exercise to, work and reward, all those things, if they're not measured and in the right balance, you'll see a lot of people switching next year as a result of it, because it's kind of the thing that has been, promoted this year. So that's where I think it will go. Whether it will or not is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's true. We're going to wrap it up there. So a massive thanks to Tom Richardson and Patrick Goulet for joining us today on the Open Source. It's been a pleasure to have you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversations, and we look forward to seeing you virtually or in person soon. Thanks.
Cheers, y'all. Thanks for having us.
Cheers, everyone.